in 90 days, we had to sell 40,000 bags of sweet potato fries. It was just like, do or die. You know, if you didn't do it, it was going to fail. People say that you make your own luck, and I don't agree with that in any capacity. What's the worst thing that can happen? They can just say no, and then you have to go again. Being used to the no is key. If your perspective and scope is near term, that's the results that you can only expect. I say this a lot to my team now that we've grown up. It's like that entrepreneurial gut is more important than any data.
Hi, my name is Ronan Kennedy, and this is the Ronan Kennedy podcast. On this show, we're going to be talking to professionals from various different careers, industries, and backgrounds to learn what they do, how they do it, and how they got into it. Today, I'm talking to my buddy Sam Dennigan, who I've known for 26 years. Ever since we were 12 years old, we met in school. Long time ago now, Sam. Hard to believe.
Prison sentence.
Prison sentence, right? Let the games begin. So, you're a CEO taking over the world, it seems. And basically, I was hoping you could take me back to school today and help me understand what it is you do and how you do it, because all of it seems like a mystery today. But one thing I wanted to ask you, I don't think I've ever asked you this before, is did you enjoy school?
Thanks for having me on, first of all. Did I enjoy school? I enjoyed probably 50% of school. I think I was very social. So like all the friendships that we still obviously have been great. I find it really difficult to study, and I find it very difficult to learn in like environments with other people. And I only learned that after school. So I enjoyed the social learning of like making friendships and like having great experiences and stuff. But learning in that way of the Irish school system where like everything runs up to an exam and then it's a memory test is an absolute fucking disaster for me. So I enjoyed school 50-50. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Right, because you were saying like just before we started, the Leaving Cert is on this week and loads of young people are feeling under unbelievable pressure that this is going to dictate the rest of their lives.
Sun is splitting the stones. Everyone's inside doing exams. I was like, we were talking about the fact that like, you know, one of the biggest sort of pressure points of doing the leaving was like at which grade you studied maths and Irish language or whatever, and it has made no fucking difference to our lives whatsoever, which is something that everyone should know. Because the stress and pressure isn't worth it. But they're all good learnings of like how to hustle, I suppose, but irrelevant.
Yeah. I think it was good for work ethic and doing really tons of focused study. Yeah. But apart from that, I can't say I took much of it forward.
Yeah, for sure. Me the same.
Was there anything that you found really attracted you in school that you wanted to study afterwards, or that has helped you since then?
The things that have made the most impact on my life from school were art and drama. Realizing that I had stage fright on the stage of the Belvedere musical in 2001 or 2 was hugely beneficial to understand what I actually had to work on if I wanted to stand up in front of people and talk. And when I tell people that, they're like, "It's a fucking lie, you're just saying that to me." But yeah, I was like terrified by stage fright. And then art for the creativity of understanding that like most people needed to solve design problems, not fiscal ones, or like just strategy of like how to build something out. And I've used my art and experiences in drama in life way more than I've used everything else.
Really, that's so interesting, right?
For sure.
The only stuff that's really creative or super open end, everything else is much more closed, right? There's an answer that we want you to find, and it's at the back of the book. Yeah. Whereas art and drama, there's no specific answer that you have to get to, right?
I couldn't have said it better.
But so tell us, how did you decide what to study in college?
It was pretty easy on the basis of how much I enjoyed the art subject. So when I left school, I went straight to Belfast to the University of Ulster, and I did what they call like foundational studies. So it was like doing a bit of everything of every art medium. And I did that for a year. And the objective of that was to do that in order to get into a prestigious art college in Dublin called NCAD. And so I went to art college in Belfast, and I went for the first week, and then I got a job in a framers and an art gallery, and I never went to college until the last week when I submitted a portfolio. So I just constantly craved this life experience of actually doing stuff as opposed to learning stuff. And I got into NCAD, and then I never went because I was too distracted by real life working examples of doing things that I liked. So yeah.
So much more drawn to the practical stuff or being in the mix.
Well, my point about how I can't learn in school is that I actually realized I can learn by doing stuff. And when I realized that I learned by doing stuff, I just wanted to do stuff all the time, have experiences, try stuff out, you know, get out of my depth. And I was really comfortable with that. So when you have that like unlock of, you know, shit, I can learn stuff by doing it. You just did it. College and school never suited me. So
that was actually a massive learning when you think about it.
Huge. And early, thankfully.
Yeah, because then you become really autonomous in your learning. You learn because you want to, and it's all self-directed as opposed to somebody telling you what to learn, when to learn it.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, Amelia, my wife, would say that, like, very hedonistic, you know, and also, you know, very self-directed. So like I can only do stuff that suits me and that I like doing. Otherwise it's an absolute torture.
Well, it seems to have suited you so far.
But so far.
Can I ask you, when you're coming out of the art college, how did you decide on your next steps?
I've been like lucky rolling forward, falling into stuff that's kind of guided my direction in life. We had a very good friend who died at the end of the term in our college, and I came back down to Dublin and then stayed there. And during the summer, decided that I was going to go traveling to Scandinavia, got a job with the family business because it was easy because of nepotism, and then realized that the like manual labor and the subject matter was really interesting, and then just continued a life in the food business.
I like the way you're leaning into the nepotism there.
Look, take the chances where you could get them.
Yeah, absolutely, and it was there for you.
Yeah.
So going into the family business, what was that like?
Initially, it was very, very exciting. When there's a legacy, multi-generational, that's something that you feel as a son of the business that is kind of not your right, but your expectation in the wider family. And, you know, family values were pretty traditional, and you were the oldest boy of a family. And, you know, there was lots of expectation possibly in that regard that you just went along with without really questioning. So it was very proud and very interesting at the start. It was also very difficult.
But do you feel pressure? You feel pressure to carry on that mantle? Or like, is there ever conversations at home of, you know, someday all this will be yours if you play your cards right? Or
that's how we grew up.
Or almost as a family, you're expected to do the dishes and to eventually take over the family business.
Yeah, that's how we grew up. So we would go in like to work with Dad on a Saturday morning or whatever. And, you know, people in the business would go, oh, be careful, here's the new boss, you know, pointing at you. So there was always this kind of expectation that other people would talk about that you just kind of lived with. And you never really, when you're young, it was kind of weird where you were like, why are these adults saying these things? And then eventually you realize that actually family businesses, that's what happens, you know? And I think you do kind of roll with that. And it's sometimes good and it's sometimes dangerous because you can be sort of drifted into that career path or life path as a result of just the family expectation or, you know, experience. I was lucky enough that I got to sort of observe it from pre-working life, then exist in it, and then make a decision. So,
but also you get like immediate status and respect because you're the son of the owners and the nephew of the owners, right? Whereas if you were starting from scratch, you have to kind of earn your stripes straight away. Or did people give you a harder time because?
That's a really good question that I've never thought about before. The status and respecting is definitely an element of it. It's weird as a child to experience that, and it actually makes you question like roles and people very, very early. The second part of your question I need you to ask again, which was important, but I can't remember. You were saying...
Or did people almost give you a harder time because they were expecting maybe more from you, or you're expected to know everything about the business? Yeah,
the reason I wanted you to repeat that is because the place where it came harder from was from the family. Once you were in there, there's like a higher expectation of you versus any other employee because of your position and expectation. So like, you know, when you do something wrong or when you're late or when X, Y, and Z happens, it's much more sort of emotionally punitive on you versus other people where it's just sort of passive.
You're expected to go in on Saturday, on Christmas Day, on Sunday. You're expected to do all these things because you're part of the family. It's a chore, right?
Yeah, they were true. Like, the growing up and going down to check the fridges on Christmas Day was a thing. So yeah, good observation.
But also, it's an interesting business, right? Because you've got the floor, or what did you guys call it?
Yeah,
the floor in the warehouse, right?
Yeah.
All the producers going in there, and you've got everyone working there to get the supply chain working well. And then you've got the suits in the boardroom, and so you're going between both of those. Is that right the whole time, or where did you start?
So I think in my situation it was a agribusiness. So not so many suits, or people in suits at least. And in an agribusiness, which is very much sort of part of the farming community, but also retailers and wholesalers and stuff, the suits were your family. In my case, my dad and my uncle and my aunts and stuff. And I think the expectation in agribusiness is that everyone has the sleeves rolled up. So like that was the environment that I grew up in. It was like suits sweep the floor, and people who sweep the floor. And there is no job that anyone shouldn't do or couldn't do as an expertise. And I think that gave me a huge amount of work ethic, actually. It was like, don't ask anyone to do a job that you wouldn't be willing to do yourself.
That's a nice culture
it is.
To get into, right? We're all part of the same team.
100%. And I've taken that through with me the whole way. And it actually makes people who work with you and for you way more respectful of you and your position. And I think if someone said that about me, I'd be really, really comfortable that I was doing good leadership,
Yeah. And it's one of the things that I think probably a lot of people don't know about you when you're coming up through the business is you're getting up at the same time as all the other guys at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning when we were in college, and you were like driving into the markets and, helping the guys sell or helping the supply chain, right? So you kind of had to, you had to learn the hard way. You had to do everything that everyone else was expected to do, right?
Yeah. But as you know about me, like I wanted every way. So I was staying out with you until 2 o'clock and then starting work at 4 or 5 a.m.
I've been meaning to talk to you about that. That wasn't a good idea.
And that was like a way of sort of experiencing both things.
Yeah, we were rolling into college at 11 a.m. thinking, I don't know how Sam did that. He was up at like 4, left at 5.
Yeah. Adam behind the camera here is laughing because he only knows me a recent amount of time, and I'm still doing this.
Still the exact same thing, right? So burning the candle at both ends.
Yeah.
What were you doing those first couple of years working in the family business? Like, how did you earn your stripes?
Day one, everyone cleans the floor. So whether it's with a brush or on a cleaning machine, the rule across the business at that stage was that you started at the bottom, and not necessarily the lowest job, but the thing that people perceived as the lowest job.
You're making this sound like a cleaning company because you're talking about sweeping the floor.
Yeah, well, in a warehouse, it's easier to keep things clean rather than let them get messy and then clean up after it. And that's also a kind of like a clean as you go, like a chef. And that was the culture in the business. So I think, for the first week, that was my job. And when you were the best cleaner in the building, then you progressed to something else, which was like order checker, order builder, and so on and so forth, which led, I definitely got fast tracked to an office job as a result of nepotism, thankfully. But the objective for me coming into a family business was, if he can't contribute at a higher level than anyone else that we can hire, what's the point in doing this? So I came into the family business in 2004 or 5 and worked in the Dublin fruit market for about 3-4 years, which was basically, for the majority of it, trading fruit and vegetables like they trade stocks. So it was a market, a physical market, but ultimately it was sort of swapping and trading things that other people had to satisfy orders that we needed to fulfill. So we were a specialist in one thing, but all the other market traders were specialists in other things. And that made it an unbelievably interesting work environment because you had to talk to other people who were trying to make more out of their thing than you were trying to make out of your thing. And the benefit was it was all tangible. It was all fruits and vegetables, and they had come in from both Ireland and other parts of the world. So you got to talk to people in Belgium and Spain and Mexico every day of the week, but you also got to talk to local people who were also having similar conversations.
But you're doing this at scale, right?
Yeah, so we were like, let's say we were importing trucks of stuff, selling pallets of stuff, sometimes selling boxes of stuff, but it was like commodity trading of tangible products on a day-to-day basis. So you're straight
in that mix of hustling and negotiating and influencing and trying to...
Dropped in the deep end, but remembering that you had to do the other jobs first. So like cleaning the floor meant that you were learning what was going off quicker than other things and what had to be sold quicker in a perishable environment. And then checking the orders was, did someone put the right stuff on it? Is the customer satisfaction level going to be high because that order is packed correctly? Picking the orders was, what is a rambutan? What is a, caped gooseberry? And like literally, like at the time, you just think it's a pain in the arse. I have to do this job. Give me an office job so I can sit in there and drink tea. But without the actual learning of all of those things, which I didn't fucking know at the time, you couldn't have done the job. So it only really landed home when you were sitting at the desk and someone was like, we need galangal root from that person who you delivered it to the week previous, and we need to sell it and put it in order for this person, and the dispatch happens at that time. And then it was like, oh shit, there was never a way I could have done this. And that grounding was the basis of all of business ventures.
It's an unbelievable internship, right?
It was the best MBA ever.
Because it was at the desk. You learned every single moving part of the business and all those trading relationships. Did you get any like mentorship or teaching or coaching to be able to trade and negotiate?
Yeah, it was like brutal just watching what happened. So I was at a desk with like 5 other dudes, and they had been doing it for a range of 50 years to 10 years. And basically knowing that I was going to be not ready for this, my dad was like, that's your desk. He's the most experienced. He's the second most experienced. Sit between the two of them and just let's see what happens. So I don't think I got an order for the first 3 months. Wow. Like I didn't sell anything for the first 3 months. I was just sitting there like listening to them, what's going on. And then I realized that the most successful of them were all going to outside the office and walking around with their order sheet with customers who came up to see them. And I was like, this isn't about being on the phone. This is about relationships. So I started walking around the market, just trying to make friends with lads who are up buying stuff. And one after another, some I got given as customers who were kind of lighter touch, sort of easier people to deal with as sort of training. And other people, I had to earn them. And that was just like active selling and learning about all of that.
Wow, it shows you a lot about...
It's quite nostalgic talking about this now.
Right.
It's very...
you feel yourself going back there?
There's a bibliography of how all this shit worked out. You know?
Yeah. Click the link below. Like an amazing internship, but also learning the grassroots and then having like tons of rejection at the start in the first 3 months. Is that fair?
So much.
But you're on the phone doing cold calls, or is it more like, here's a list of relationships we have?
So both. So the morning was the most exciting bit of the business because it was when the market prices changed for everything. So you would get a list of what everything cost every day. And you would also get a list of people who were the early buyers. So the reason it started at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning was because everyone was there in the market buying stuff from around the market, the other traders, to sell stuff to people that was going out in the morning trucks to get to the restaurants by lunchtime to be prepped to sell that evening. So that's why it was opening so early. And if you missed the sort of 5 to 7 a.m. slot, you were only selling for people who were selling the next day. And you were selling sort of with like old prices, basically, things that had to be shipped further. And so I can't remember the question. That was the lead up to it. Yeah.
To be honest, I can't remember the question now either.
Okay, good.
No, it's just it's fascinating how you had to do that internship and all the insights that you get from it. I suppose I'm really trying to tap into how every step on your journey has led you to where you are now. So it's just interesting to learn that you go from sweeping floors to learning that actually I got to get out and meet people to understand maybe those nuances in negotiations where someone says, well, maybe I can actually help you out there, which maybe you don't get on the phone because it's more of a black and white type of relationship.
The people thing is the most important. Like the understanding how to listen and understand people's needs far beyond what the quantity that they're ordering and the price that they're negotiating is the most important thing. And that's why I still, try and effort huge value into the business now. So when we're going to Bentonville to talk to Walmart, or when I'm going to Chicago to talk to McDonald's, it's like understanding by being in the person's ecosystem what they actually want, because people never tell you what they want. You have to read what they want most of the time.
Or sometimes they don't know, right?
Exactly.
They just want something good or something that's going to solve their problem.
Exactly.
But also it's really interesting because it's got to inform you when you're talking to salespeople or when you're hiring your team to go and talk to people. You know what to look for because
100%.
You've seen what doesn't work and what does work compared to if you were just launched into a position of CEO.
Yeah.
Right? Would have been much harder.
The only thing I disagree with you on that is judging what product people want is different than judging what people you need for your business, because people present in an interview scenario completely different to how they are, and actually you need multiple people to read whether they're the right person for you, the business, the job, and the environment, whereas a product is more definitive. So if you go to sell someone potatoes, first of all that they want to buy potatoes, so that's one thing that you can kind of check off the list. But when you're hiring a person or choosing a person for your organization or to work for you or whatever, it has to work for both parties. So you know what you're getting and they know what they want, and both people are kind of only half sure. So you have to basically do the investigation to make sure that actually what both people want or what parties want and what the outcome is completely legitimate.
Yeah.
And I've actually found that one of the most difficult things in business, to flesh out whether the relationship is going to work in a working environment. And actually that's probably where I've made the most mistakes, is choosing wrong person for the wrong job at the same time as they're choosing wrong company for the wrong role.
It's super difficult to get right though.
It's impossible.
Have you learned anything in that process that you think, you know what, there's a good rule of thumb I could use the next time?
I don't often quote Gary Vee, but
of course you can.
He hire slow and fire fast is the best thing you could do, and in an appropriate, meaningful way that considers the person, but you call it quickly.
Yeah.
Call it quickly and go with your gut.
Make the decisive moves.
Yeah.
Can I ask you about moving on from the family business? Like you could have stayed there forever. You could still be there. Nice role, good company.
Yeah.
You're gonna probably eventually take over the helm if you just kick back and keep going. Why did you decide to crack on?
Like I think any entrepreneur, there's an itch to scratch. And I knew it was there. And there were certain parts of my personality and ambition that I knew weren't going to be possible as part of the family business. A brand was one thing. And I had, tried a couple of times within the family's business to make a consumer brand work. And the business models just don't match up for various different reasons. That was the main thing. And then the global aspect of business was another reason. So brand the first, and wanting to step outside the Irish market the second, and an unbranded commodity supply business that only has a Irish national presence. Those two things didn't fit. So it was eventually it was an easy decision that took 10 years to make.
But did you ever have any conversations about like, why don't you let me start a wing of this, the international wing?
I did,
and I'll be the CEO of the international wing and you guys keep...
Yeah, I don't think I ever asked to be CEO because I know what answer I would have got there. But yeah, there was definitely like a, what about this as a business unit type of thing. And, I think we tried that in a couple of instances, particularly with the brands. The things that failed for me, Sam's Potatoes, which I know you're a huge fan of.
Love them.
Ate a lot of them. And Green Giant Fresh were the two kind of things that I see as failures and learnings at the same time. But ultimately, like the business model of consumer CPG brands is completely different than supply of white label, private label. And having, stress tested those things for 3 to 5 years, I just knew it wasn't going to work. So I needed to change it up.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
So how did you come up with the idea, and how did you Well, actually, let's go with the idea first, because I also want to know how you actually launched, because that is a super scary thing for most of us humans.
Yeah. As you well know, the idea came from, a couple of failures in brands where I was trying to bring healthy, natural, simple products to a consumer that were super complicated to make, but not super complicated to understand. So the first 10 years of the career, we're trying to figure out like what healthy, fresh food people wanted to eat and how to get them to choose your variety or packaging versus someone else's. Where I got to on that was, there's a brand missing here. And the brand is able to tell the story and add the value and give consciousness and commitment and ambition to like what the company's all about. Whereas if you're just buying something, that has been grown and there's none of the value of who grew it, where it came from and why it exists, then it's very difficult to convince people why to take this one and this one other than price. And I wanted price to become a secondary
consideration,
characteristic of choice than I had been used to. So I wanted people to buy into something that they believed in and that had a purpose and a mission and so on. So the idea came from wanting to speak to more people and having more reach. And doing that with the commodity is quite difficult unless you grow something that no one else grows, which in the agri community is not impossible, but very few.
Sounds like a hard thing to do, to brand frozen food, to make it more, I don't know, exciting, attractive, sexy. People would still be like, still more expensive. Why bother?
Yeah, at the time, that was the general perception. And that's why no one went near the space. And the unlock was us doing a lot of research in fresh and frozen food about like what existed and didn't exist. And we found out really quickly that the reason that no one had innovated in the sector was because it was really difficult, but the outcome could be really big. So things that are really difficult, that have really big outcomes, need a lot of money and capital to do it. But ultimately, if you know how, then that can be a bit of an unlock. But the reason that no one had tried it before is because you've got maybe 3 or 4 massive companies who kind of own the whole thing. And, venture and private equity look at that and they go, oh, that's not worth it. It's too big of a company to fight for space.
That's what I was thinking, right? You're competing against the biggest and the best in the world.
Yeah.
Maybe they can overtake a startup in the morning if they want to and just throw.
And that
all
was
the
the
money
general perception. But the reality was that because they had it to themselves, they had no innovation, they had no R&D, they had stopped trying, they were making loads of money, so they didn't need to effort. And having spent so much time in the General Mills structure of Green Giant Fresh and realizing how broken it was, I was able to see like it would be quicker to do this ourselves. And actually they're not ready to compete. It'll take them 3 or 4 years to do it. It actually takes them 10. But we thought at the time it takes them 3 or 4 years to do it. So their reaction was going to be slower than our innovation. And we saw that from the inside, which was very lucky from an entrepreneurial perspective.
Ironically, their size was what was holding them back. Whereas you might be nervous about going into it, but
size, bureaucracy,
you guys are going to be more nimble, more adaptable.
Absolutely. And it was that agility and, kind of didn't have anyone to give a fuck about attitude, and naivety that allowed us to exist and progress.
But there's tons of different ways you could go about it, right? There's tons of different frozen products you could come up with. There's tons of different, angles you could go. You could look at other markets, see what's working there, try to replicate it at home. And if you're going to put all your eggs into one basket to get one product going, that seems like a scary proposition. Like if I was in those shoes of you back then, I'd be like, how do I know this product is going to work, or I'm not going to like lose my shirt?
Yeah. No, you're right. The first product we had such a good instinct about because there was a huge amount of demand and no supply. Classic economics. And I knew this from trying to supply raw materials to manufacturers around Europe. My now acquirer was one of the people who I was trying to sell a lot of product to make something that no one could get. So the insight was there's no supply and tons of demand, and that company are not ready to do it. How complicated would it be to reverse engineer the supply chain and do it? So that first product, our sweet potato fries, was kind of the test and solution to a market problem that allowed us to think bigger about other things in that sector. Right. So it was like when our second product was a veggie burger, because there was only shit tasting veggie burgers, and all the other companies who were doing the other stuff was doing the other thing.
I'm with you.
Yeah. So we did that, and then it was like, okay, what else can we do? Nuggets, veggie nuggets and plant-based nuggets are shit. We should do one of them that tastes good.
So just looking at what was being provided and seeing alternative solutions. Yeah. But how did you know the demand was there for sweet potatoes?
Because I was the supplier of raw material at the time for the processors that were trying to fill the demand. So, basically we saw a market problem and solved it in a relatively shorter space of time than everyone else could get there. So first mover advantage was a very important part.
So you had data from being in the company for years. It was a reoccurring problem?
We could see that the consumption of sweet potato, for example, over a 5-year period in fresh had gone from 0 to 13% of the market of fresh potato. And it was very easy to be like, oh, this is going to be a thing. And if we can capitalize on this being a thing, as well as looking at health trends, like paleo was a massive thing at the time. Lower glycemic index was being talked about in like fashion magazines and stuff about how to, stop insulin spikes in your blood and do better training and all these kind of things. A lot of which have been sort of sidetracked since then, but at the time it was a trend. And all the things, and this is, I say this a lot to my team now that we've grown up. It's like, that entrepreneurial gut is more important than any data. So if you've got the data and you've got the tingle, still do it, even if there's other factors that say you shouldn't. And entrepreneurial gut is something that bigger companies lose because you always have to be right. And that's the beauty of entrepreneurship. It's like taking the risk and making sure that you for some reason know that this is the right thing to do.
What is that though? That's really interesting to break down.
Stupidity and gut instinct. Like it doesn't have to be anything. It's just like curiosity maybe.
Curiosity, pattern identification. I wonder.
Maybe.
Not to put boring phrases on something that seems very intuitive.
You come across this in various more ways than I do with like consistency across entrepreneurs. And I think there's definitely just a more risk-prone person who's willing to sort of act poorly on decision-making more often than others. And that mixed with good knowledge and good data is I think, the secret sauce. And
experience in the industry has got to help a lot as well. Yeah. Speaking of risk, you have this business idea, you're looking at the data, you've got a good gut, you go home to your other half and you say, guess who's got an idea? How did that conversation go?
Well, Amelia is like unbelievably supportive of everything that I do. And she was at a point in her career where she was on the way up. She was an economist at the time. She was doing a master's in Trinity and she had a great job and she was able to support us. And we didn't have a mortgage and our rent wasn't that high. And we basically made a joint decision that worst case scenario was we would lose the deposit that we'd built up for our house and that our parents had helped us with. And that wasn't a bad enough reason not to risk the upside.
So the downside back to zero and working again and renting again.
Yeah. We used data and we used an entrepreneurial gut to make the decision on both sides. And thankfully for us, it worked out. But it was a joint decision for sure.
Okay. So that helps a lot, right? Because then you've got the support of her going into every decision after that. So what was the next step? A business plan and a business case? Or was it more going into a food academy?
I met this guy called Ronan Kennedy who now does a podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And we sat down, if you remember, and we basically we decompartmentalized our lives from everything from mental health, physical health, strategy, KPIs, goals and ambitions, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We did everything. Yeah. And knowing exactly what you need as a person for validation, excitement, challenge, etc. before you start out in the journey was super important. Because I think for different courses, there's different horses, and that sort of exercise with you showed what I would need. I think those things have changed over time. More learning, more growth and discovery.
Absolutely. And as you go through different stages of life, it changes naturally as your values change and your life stage changes, right?
We were talking about it off camera. Like what I need now is different what I needed then, obviously. But yeah, sitting down and actually planning what would suit you was super important. And then, as a result of trying to raise some money for the business, I decided that the funding route at the time was a credit line from the bank, and that's because I didn't know about any other funding routes. So when I had to go into the bank and kind of sing for my supper, I had to do a business plan.
Right.
And we did a 3 to 5 year out business plan of where we thought we could get to.
You and who?
Myself and me at the time.
You and you, okay, yeah, okay.
And Amelia, to be fair, came in for the pitch because I think they wanted to make sure that my wife was on board with what was about to happen. Okay. So we weren't co-signers for it, but I remember the bank manager in Drumcondra in Bank of Ireland. It was like, would you ask your wife to come in as well? Because, this is going to be a big decision.
It's interesting. He's using gut decisions as well, right?
Yeah,
he's not just using the data that you guys have.
Yeah. And the two of us went in, and then I pitched my little heart out to like a 10 or 20 slide deck. I can't remember. I still have the deck.
That's mad.
And I can tell you that we delivered everything in the deck
really?
A couple of years before we were going to, which is
But
very cool.
Was it relatively straightforward? Like you go, look, there's our there's the cash reserves we have. Here's my deck, and then they were.
No, it was more complicated than that because the only loan that he could figure out to give me was a car loan.
Right.
And he was doing me a solid, and I hope this doesn't get him in trouble. But basically, he gave me a 60 grand car loan that had to be paid back in 90 days. It was a stocking loan. So if you're a car dealer, you go to the UK or whatever, you buy a secondhand car, you bring it back, you sell it, and you pay them back and take your profit. And he was like, that was the only mechanism that he could figure out how to fund the type of business that I had, because we had no assets, but we also had no liabilities. We were trading with a blue chip company, but we were also straight off the blocks. And then the thing that sort of made the difference was like the 10 years experience in the family business and probably the family name as well, where it was like, worst case scenario, we can probably like.
But you have a bit of cash reserve as well, or you could, they can always go back to the family business, right?
This is what they were thinking.
But then you don't want them to go back.
Of course not. It would have been the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
But they gave us 60 grand, and that was to buy one container of sweet potato fries. And we paid back in 90 days, and they gave us another one, which was bigger, and so on and so forth. And that kind of, it was weird. It was weird because in 90 days, we had to sell 40,000 bags of sweet potato fries at the time. And the pressure of not failing was the thing that made the business successful.
What's it feel like that moment you get 60K and they go, okay, time starts now. You've got 90 days.
So we only had 60 days to sell this stuff because it came a month late. And thankfully, like it was the pressure, but a lot of things aligned, like a supermarket relationship aligned, and an advertising campaign that they did, that they put me in, that Christmas happened. And then a couple of influencers blew us up in the early days, and like people were going in and buying 10 and 20 packs of this stuff.
But was that by chance or by design? Like, had you reached out to these influencers, or were they just loving it because it was a healthy?
People say that you make your own luck, and I don't agree with that in any capacity, because things that happened for us without us trying to happen, were the making of this. Like 50% was design, 50% was pure chance. And, I don't like hearing that people didn't have the luck of the draw, because just how things aligned for us at the beginning was exceptionally important. And like when things came up and certain deadlines of stuff and people that we met and the goodwill of that, like that was lucky, like that was unplanned.
So if it was starting 3 months before COVID, it would have been a different story?
Who knows? Thankfully, I don't have to think about
have to
it.
worry
But
about
like
that, yeah.
that was. I mean, here's a good example. So we launched with Whole Foods Market, our biggest customer to date in the world, the week of the closures of COVID, and we were like, we're goosed. They have loads of stock. It's going to go off, and before they sell it. And what happened was that because people panic bought in the American market so much, we were the only brand left on the shelf for 2 weeks when everything else was purchased. So people had to buy and try our products. They bought it and they loved it, but they didn't know that they would love it. And it was really expensive when we launched. So if COVID hadn't happened, I don't think Whole Foods would have been as successful at an account as it was today. And we certainly didn't design the COVID pandemic.
No, hopefully not, right?
So like that's a really good example of how things fell our way at the wrong time and still worked out. You know, you can't plan for that.
Oh, unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. When you think about those first 90 days, and obviously you have to get some help, right? Because you can't do it all yourself.
Yeah.
You're kicking off. You've got a van full of stuff. You're driving it, or you've got someone else driving it for you. How do you start a team? Right. I think that first member or 2 or 3 members has got to be crucial, right? Because if they're 150% just like you are, that's going to make all the difference.
Yep.
So how do you go about hiring those first couple of people?
I wouldn't do it the way we did it again, but the way we did it was successful for us for lots of reasons, which is mostly down to loyalty and the belief in people. Like our first hire, as you know, was a lady called Indira Fernandez, and she was a Venezuelan national who had left Venezuela because of what was going on in Venezuela, dictatorship, and literally being ousted from their homes. No food, no energy. It was crazy. She came with her husband, who luckily had a Spanish passport. They were able to stay in Ireland and make a life for themselves. But Indira had no English when she started for me, but she was the brand manager for all of the Unilever brands in Venezuela and Colombia. So I was like, I'll pigeon Spanish this. She's got all the skills that I don't have. She's willing to do an internship for 3 months for free on the basis that she'll be fully employed after that. And she was babysitting at the time. And basically was like, I need to get back into the CPG industry. She had interviewed with every single CPG company in Ireland. None of them had given her a job because she couldn't speak English, which is fair enough. But for me, this was brilliant because I was able to afford her because she wasn't looking for payment while we were figuring out whether it was going to work.
Amazing.
And it meant so much to her that she grafted so much in those 3 months where she was only like part-timing for me, that it worked. And like she couldn't drive either. So I had to hire a driver for her to go in the van, for her not to have English, to go and sell stuff door to door or in the stores. And then I was in the other van doing the same thing.
Wow.
And they were the best times as well. You know, it was like everything's new. You don't know what's happening. It was just like do or die. You know, if you didn't do it, it was going to fail.
I mean, I feel anxious just thinking about it. It seems like a massive stretch for me, but also that's because I'm so far away from this industry.
We had put ourselves in this scenario, so there was no doing anything else.
So you're just walking into these supermarkets around the country, or you're going in to meet like the supermarket manager or the head of the brand, like Dunnes or Tesco, or?
It depended. Basically, we were part of this thing called Food Academy, which is like an incubator for small food brands. And I knew more than most people in that incubator because I'd worked in it for 10 years. So I was really just using that as a sort of an entry to a retailer that I didn't know. And normally what you do is you get 20 stores and you have to build relationships and do stuff with them. But I was like, I've got a container of sweet potato fries. I need more stores than 20. We can never possibly sell this much stuff in 20 stores. And they were like, okay, you can have 100 stores. And I was like, great. How does it get distributed? And they're like, oh no, you have to deliver it. And I was like, okay, well, where do I set up with central accounts? Like, oh no, you have to set up an account with every single one of them. And I was like, I have to do like, you know, accounts payable with every single one of these 100 stores in order to get the kickoff. And they're like, yep. And this was supposed to teach you the whole supply chain of
logistics,
you know, the administration and everything. So we did it. We did it in 30 days, and it was a mad time. It shouldn't have worked, but as a result of the fact that we made it work, so we went back to the guy who used to run this food academy, and he's like, you sold 100,000 euros worth of stuff in the first 30 days. How did you do that? And I was like, oh, just the two of us in the van. And they were like, you've already graduated this year-long food academy. After 30 days, we're going to bring you into the main set. So we graduated quickly. They put us in their Christmas ad, and then we went through their main distribution channels. But there was all this mad learning on the way.
That was an amazing kickoff though, right? Getting that distribution. Yeah. But yeah, it's still really hard to wrap my head around. You're going in, you're just kind of saying, these are sweet potato fries. You want to put them in your store? And they kind of go, yeah, we'll give them a try for a month.
No, there was a whole pitch, you know.
Okay,
there was a whole pitch, and there was, you know, we also used to learn as we went. So like I'd be ringing Indira going, you know, you need to go and print out pictures of the products and pictures of the barcodes so that they can, because we learned on the fly that they can scan it and then order it on a thing versus having to do it by fax. And so we didn't even have a fucking fax machine. They were all still faxing orders. So there was just like, it was a learn how you go on the road, like the most agile remote business scenario you can possibly think of, just two people kind of making it work.
Just, making a go of it.
Yeah.
Do you think your experience in the family business allowed you to think at scale in the food academy, the way maybe other people just weren't exposed to that? They just accepted, okay, these are the terms that I have.
Yeah.
Whereas you're like, well, immediately that's not going to work for me because...
So when we were accepted into the main distribution channel, that's what we had planned for. We actually had to learn all the other stuff in those 30, 60 days. So the latter part was what we knew. And then we could sort of, you know, freely flow product through the system. The first part is actually probably one of the most invaluable parts of my career to date, because it was like hyper micro learning about something that we didn't know that most SMEs have to learn, but they never get past that part. So now I actually mentor small businesses on how to pass that part quickly so that they don't get stuck in a vicious cycle of like, that's the kind of part where as a food business, if you're doing that across a country like Ireland, you can never get past the revenue of like 500,000. And to get past that part, it's a massive chasm. And there's a great book called Crossing the Chasm about this. George Moore, I think it's by. And that's about going from, you know, early adopters to mass consumerism. And I knew that part and I didn't know this part. And it's a difficult bridge to cross.
Do you think a lot of people get stuck there?
Well, I mean, 90% of SMEs, the 10% that survive make the jump. The 90% that don't and understand how to move it to scale, that's where they get stuck.
What's the difficulty? Is it they don't have the knowledge, or it's the self-belief and risk-taking that they struggle with?
I think it's the perception and scope of scale. Like, I don't think I learned what TAM, or total addressable market, was until 4 years ago. And in Stanford, they learn it on the first day. So the difference of learning about capitalism and what your audience is and that stuff is not necessarily something that's taught in Ireland. It's probably taught in a business course that I never attended, but it's certainly not taught on day one.
It wasn't in my business course.
There you go. But in markets that promote entrepreneurialism and venture, it's day one. And I think a lot of the problem, and I've talked to a lot of the agencies in Ireland about about like Enterprise Ireland, for example, about the fact that I think if we're going to change our entrepreneurship on a global scale to compete with the likes of what's happening in Salinas Valley, then we have to change the education system from the start. And I strongly believe that. And I think we're at a disadvantage from just being from where we're from. Not for a lot of other things, personality, graft, grit we have in our droves. And I think we could be super dangerous on a global scale if we could actually teach the theory quicker.
What's the sort of response you get when you pitch those ideas?
We agree. Will you help us do it?
Okay.
So open. The agencies in Ireland want to understand how to develop Ireland in the right way, and they're definitely receptive for sure.
Okay, that'd be great, because we've phenomenal talent and entrepreneurship and drive at home, and just trying to allow people to cross those borders and go to the UK.
It's also, for Irish people in particular, it's terrifying to say the word billion. Even terrifying to say the word million a lot of the time, because of our upbringing and humility and expectation and just general culture. When you go to the US, it's where people start the conversation. whether it's true or not a lot of the time. And I think our sort of scope and ambition needs to change its mindset if we want to do that as well.
Do you think it's because we're insular, like that we're an island, that we don't really get exposed to these bigger ideas, these bigger scales, bigger numbers?
I think we'd have to have a few pints to have
Okay,
that
to go into that one
conversation
in more detail,
completely.
okay.
But there's it's definitely a from our culture thing. It's changing, and there's obviously like anomalies within that. We've some super successful entrepreneurs who are billionaires, and they're all around the world now. But and that's from the graft part. I think there could be many more if we changed our perception on how to do business and where to do business at the same time.
That'd be phenomenal. But great to hear that you're helping out other people and helping them chart a pathway, right?
I think paying it forward is a big part of our privilege. I think, that's why I'm part of an organization like Endeavour, for example, because it's a paid forward entity that basically people who have done it, showing people how to do it. So I'm a big advocate for progressive sort of mentorship and things like that. Yeah.
Giving back, yeah?
Yeah.
Big-hearted fella. Can I ask you, so you get this, you sell all the pallets of your sweet potato fries. You got a bit of cash in the bank. Now, what's next?
In the journey in general?
Yeah, in the journey, yeah.
I think we launched quickly into all the national Irish retailers. And then my ambition was always to go abroad. And the UK market was the closest and biggest, and they spoke the same language and they had the same food trends. So we went there. And then subsequently, that was the model for how we built the business. So we built up a business to a point at which it could be delegated and passed on to someone else's management, and then moved to the next region, did the same thing, moved to the next region, did the same thing. And that's still how the business develops at the moment. More people, lots more talent, lots more regions. But ultimately we took this, I think in theory, they call it the Citadel approach, where it's like concentrate on a specific area, become really, really famous for something, and then go to the next one and build another citadel or fortress around that and do it again and again and again. Build the ecosystems in different places.
Do you find that intimidating at all? Like going to like the UK and setting up a new citadel there, hiring a team, like you're ramping up your responsibilities and you're outgoing and your risk all the time? Or is that just, part of the game?
Well, having done the Maslow's hierarchy of needs with me, I don't. And the variety is really important. So like going and talking to people and not having risk and having variety and all those things is like what makes me. Declan O'Brien, a good friend of ours from school, reminded me recently that when I used to live with him in West Hampstead in London before Amelia moved over, he said we were sitting on the couch one morning and he was just like, I remember he saying, I'm going to go and find a Tesco buyer in their head office and buy them a coffee and just bring it to them and see how it goes one day. Cool. And he was just like, you can't just rock up and do it. And I was like, there's no rules,
Yeah.
So that was my trick. I would just like buy an extra Starbucks and land in at the HQs. And if you had one there, they would rarely say no.
You serious?
So I've heard of a lot of people doing that since. But like, what's the worst thing that can happen?
So you just rock into head office, go, I have an extra coffee. Can I talk to the...
Did you? A couple of times. What's the worst thing that can happen? They can just say no and then you have to go again. Being used to the no is key. No is just a opportunity to go and ask the question again for me. And you have to be comfortable with that. And having done the whole stint in the fruit market, you've reminded me earlier and just been told to fuck off the whole time.
Yeah, you get real.
It was just part of the conversation at the end. Yeah.
But it's interesting, like the questions you're asking yourself. I don't know if you know this consciously, but the questions you're asking yourself, like what's the worst that could happen? Or how can we scale this? Or how can we go into a new market? Like you're asking really great questions that are giving you better answers, where a lot of us would ask questions that would maybe hold us back. Like what are they going to say? Or what if I fail? Or what are people going to think? But like, is that a conscious thing that you have in your head where you're always just kind of thinking like worst case scenario? Or
I'm a very long-term strategic thinker. So from the beginning of the business, my goal was to make this a global household brand. And if that's your goal, you're not worried about someone saying no to a one-time meeting, know?
So you're asking yourself, how can I make this a global household brand? And then everything is just going towards that. And
If you're, and this is one of the things that I really try and push in the mentorship sessions regularly. It's like, if your perspective and scope is near term, that's the results that you can only expect. But if you're trying to break through the barrier of global household brand and you're coming short to that, your shortcomings are far beyond your day-to-day near-term goals. And having that perspective means that your short-term failings along the way are irrelevant in the long-term goal. So if you get embarrassed in a meeting about not doing a great pitch, it's just an opportunity to come back and do it again so that you can get to your goal. Or if you make the wrong decision on a person, from a business suitability perspective, you're only making a wrong that time in the thousands that you're going to have to make in the future. So you get over yourself quicker. And most people's decision-making process is based on fear. So is mine, but there's more granular elements of fear to get over along the way. So I think that's how it works.
I love that. That's fascinating. You've stretched it out over a much longer period of time. So then all the smaller ones are irrelevant. Kind of blown my mind a little bit on that one.
The insignificance is really, really powerful. Like if even if, not to go too deep too quickly, but when you think about life and how people get like, mortified or ashamed over like actions and stuff that they've done, I don't mean like, there's you need to be a constant good actor, but people get tied up about stuff that really is insignificant, and life's too short. And I think the perspective that you have on life and your ambition are completely tied in together, and they will join up.
Yeah, I love it. I love it deep. Well, food for thought on that one. All right, I'm gonna have to reflect on that one later. Can I ask you, when you're thinking about your next products, how do you go about making those decisions? Like how many products do you have now?
I saw a slide the other day because I didn't know. And I think we've got like 55 products.
55 products?
Now, some of them are the same, but in different regions. But the way we would look at it is that like, there might be a slight difference in a sweet potato fry for Australia than there is for America.
But like as individual units, like sweet potatoes, avocado halves, burgers, and so on, you've got like
55 now.
55 overall.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. Okay. When you think about those strategic decisions about what to sell next or what to produce next, how do you go about doing that? Because obviously they're all big investment choices. What you produce, I guess, tons of time goes into figuring out all that.
So, as you know, I've sold the business relatively recently. And I have a new job now. And instead of being CEO, which the position is now done by a great lady called Charlotte Turton, I'm the Chief Brand and Product Advisor. So actually my whole role now is to try and figure out what products we do and where we go next. They call it disruption NPD, new product development, which is basically like not what exists, what can exist. And it's now very different to entrepreneurial gut and instinct. While that still plays a part in it, now it's about what country are we talking about? What are the cultural nuances of that country? How many people could buy the product? What is the data analysis and the trend analysis for these type of ingredients? Does it fit in with paleo? Can it go in an air fryer? Does it fit GLP-1 status? All the weight loss drugs that people are using now, and so on and so forth. So the list of the filter has become so broad because failing now is more costly than it has ever been. The only risk at the start with the sweet potato fries was the loan of the 60 grand or whatever. Now it is 55 people's jobs and livelihoods and all of the capital invested and a business partnership and esteem launch and esteem loss, but rather, and everything else involved. So the decision making structure is now completely different, but still with the entrepreneurial gut sprinkled in. It's a part of it now, not all of it.
Okay.
So it's like you're trying to figure out what people are going to need about 3 to 5 years before they need it. And it's complicated and so interesting. And why people get into the food industry is because of the job I have, which is kind of very privileged. But yeah, it's like it's analysis more than it is chef in a kitchen now.
Sounds like we need a whole other podcast just to discuss that one thing.
I could spend days talking about
okay.
product development for sure. Yeah.
Okay. So fantastic. You got that new job recently. Can you tell us a little bit about that transition?
Yeah. Maybe to step back to the decision tree of the whole thing, we took in McCain Foods, Canadian company, about 2 years ago as an investor, just over 3 years ago, as a minority investor. So I've been the sort of controlling entity for the last nearly 10 years. And at Christmas, I was WhatsApping one of my board members who was one of the representatives for McCain on our board about like the future of the business. And we'd had a couple of board meetings where it was clear that we were going to have to raise more money. And it was clear that McCain Foods wanted Strong Roots to be a bigger strategic part of their future. And we had been doing various different projects in different regions to sort of like, we were dating and thinking about getting married for about 2 or 3 years. And basically at Christmas, over a few WhatsApps, myself and Peter Dawes, the Chief Growth and Strategy Officer for McCain Foods, decided it would be good to get married. Beautiful. And, they brought a good dowry and we basically got married. And at the 9th of April, we closed a deal for them to acquire the whole lot of the share capital of Strong Roots. So
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a wild ride. And there's a couple of important parts to the deal, which were they're buying it all, but they don't want to change anything that's working and good and creating like the personality and value to the business. So one part was that we kind of set up an internal board or brand advisory council, which we call the Scion. The Scion is a grafted part of a plant onto another plant that still keeps all of its value. And I'm the new chairperson of that. We've got 9 other people on that board, from internal, from external, some like super, super famous people, lots of experience. And that's basically to make sure that nothing that was great isn't great inside a big organization. So that was one of the most important parts of the acquisition, was to make sure that we didn't undo anything that we'd spent 10 years doing. Like things like B Corp is a hugely important thing to us. And B Corp is what's called a benefit corporation. And it's about trying to run a company that has a triple bottom line of people, planet, and profit, not just the last P. So I wanted to make sure that those things would continue to exist after the fact. And then the other thing that we did was keep it as a separate business unit. So it's not something that actually happens as part of the day-to-day of McCain Foods. So Strong Roots is still Strong Roots, and McCain is still McCain. And they haven't, there has been an acquisition, but there hasn't been what they call a full integration, which is incredibly important for the brand to be what it is. And then for the majority, some people decided to leave of their own volition. For the majority, all the people are still in the same positions. And that's been the biggest sort of efforted approach to make sure that like everyone feels secure and safe. And normally what happens in an acquisition is that none of that happens. So we tried to do the most people equity driven transaction that has ever been done. Like literally myself and the CPO sat down and we were like, what would success look like at the end of this? And it would be that everyone's still happy and secure and loves doing their job.
You're doing it across those different metrics, not just purely
exactly
the financial, the revenue perspective.
Exactly, because our culture was what made the business, and the sort of the effort and the graft and all the things I've told you about before, like that goes through 55 people, not just the first 2. And we didn't want to lose that. Now, change has to happen.
Right, of course. There's going to be there's going to be friction in any sort of change, right?
Yeah, and worry and concern and all the things that you'd expect when there's major change going on in a business. But we're actually now 60 days in.
Fantastic.
And everything is exactly as we wanted it to be at this stage, which is a mad thing to be able to say. I mean, like, people happy, people incentivized to do their job, no value loss, huge opportunity, nothing changed that shouldn't have been changed, and all of the benefits of the resources that we needed.
Amazing. Is it weird for you taking a little bit of a step to the side? Is that fair?
It's very welcome.
Yeah.
As I tell Charlotte every day now, this is your problem now.
Yeah.
But it's been great. It still feels like it's mine. I don't think it'll ever change, and I still feel a huge amount of responsibility to making sure that it's successful in its next stage of the journey. But the lack of responsibility on a day-to-day basis is very welcome.
Are you still kind of the public-facing figure?
Only because of timing, I would say. So part of my role is actually external stakeholder management, and I think if there was a big sort of public speaking opportunity, I would make sense. But probably more to do with just experience and skill set as a result of that, and being sort of so dialed into what we are. Over time, I'd expect that to change. Like, we have a great senior leadership team, all of which I would put out publicly.
I guess there'd be a natural transition, right?
Yeah, like, I think, my role is founder and the job title that I said, and I think I'll always be founder. No one else can take that role. Right. So I think there'll always be a position for me to play in that. But yeah, it's, I'm 60 days in, maybe we should do this again in a year and
see
tell you what
where
the
you're
follow
at
up is.
Yeah, wow. It sounds like, it sounds exciting. So I guess you weren't really too worried about handing over your business baby, so to speak, because you had a good plan in place and you felt like a lot of trust with the guys you were working with.
I was actually invited to become part of the panel who selected the next CEO.
Oh, okay.
And when we were having that discussion, I sort of made it quite clear quite quickly that I didn't think we really needed to do a selection panel. And Charlotte had been working with the business for maybe 3 years before, as part of, the sort of business development team who were brought in to help understand what Strongways was for the McCain organization. And she was just the best and obvious candidate, understood who the people were, understood what we were trying to do. And, my role is to support her as much as possible to be successful in this as much as it is to do everything else.
Nice.
So I really appreciated and the honor of being part of who chooses. And I think the team really appreciated that as well, because not only do I think it's right, but it was obvious for them too. So that just shows you the level of respect that they have for like what we've done so far. Yeah.
It's nice to hear how much a part of culture, or how much you focus on culture, the relationships, bringing people on board, ensuring everyone feels safe and comfortable with the move. I think it's a great lesson for how to run a successful business and how to get people to buy in, because, I mean, how much extra do you need people to do when you're in a startup? For, maybe you need more than just 100% that they've agreed when they've signed their contract, right?
Yep. All the time, and of course. And I think if we're going to be an example of a commercial entity that can do better and still be profitable, like, it has to be disruptive at every level. The challenger brand mindset and the disruption doesn't stop at like product development. It has to go through your people strategy and your supply chain strategy, or like, what type of offices you have and what kind of food you serve. It all has to be thought about.
Do the team, or do the team have a big focus on, let's say, sustainability, environment, veganism, or like how do those? Because obviously, like, if you're steering the ship, you want to make sure the team are heard and listened to, but also you're keeping an eye on the finances and the whole operation. Like, how does that work? Where you're trying to navigate the revenue and the sustainability, or these other?
It's a great question, and I think is probably understood by 50% of people. Like, I would say half of the people that we've hired in the last 2 years found us through a B Corp website. That's been one of the single most best recruitment tools that we've had as a result of our certification, because most of the people we hire are from really big businesses that weren't great, looking to use their skill sets in businesses who are conscious about it. So half the people that we have now are vegan or B Corp advocates or sustainability advocates in a way that's like progressive in their own lives. So they'll, be going to a rally or will be making choices and supporting other brands consciously all the time. Like we don't have, of course we have some sort of people who are passive to that, but ultimately, it's an all-inclusive workforce where you have to have everyone, diversity, equity, and inclusion are a very important part of like building a successful workforce. So we don't demand that those things are in place. I know some brands in the past have said like, if you're not this, you can't be that.
It wouldn't be very inclusive.
No, exactly. But it happens, believe it or not. Yeah. And also, sometimes there's an expectation of it. Like when we go out for dinner with other supplying companies, they're like, look, we know you're vegan, but I'm like, I'm not vegan. Those 10 people are, but like, we can have a plant-based food company without everyone being vegan. And it's important to understand why and not sort of expect this kind of overworthy culture trying to be a global household brand, which is sometimes controversial with people, but ultimately, the characters in the workforce have to have as much diversity as we're expecting the consumers.
Yeah, it could set unattainable expectations of the staff or put them under undue pressure, especially if they want a good job for a company that has good values. And then you're saying, well, and now personally, we've all these other expectations of. So it could be tricky going into people's personal lives then too much, right? So,
well, you can't encroach. You can encourage. You can have a good mindset, but as soon as you're over serving people your agenda to exist in their own personal lives, you're losing people.
It's a really nice filter though to have if they're going through that other job search site to find you already, probably their values are really closely aligned to Strong Roots.
I think my chief people officer Derek would say the most important thing in an interview situation or a recruitment drive or whatever is, if it's not a hell yes for both sides, it's not a maybe or that'd be good. If it's not a hell yes for both sides, then you shouldn't even bother with it.
Isn't that kind of a good tip for lots of things?
Absolutely.
Either we're 100% in.
Most things.
Yeah, for a lot of things. I think it's a great tip overall, because if you're not 100% into something, then you're only going to give it part, and then you're only going to get part result. Absolutely. And then that part result is going to feed back into a belief you have about the next action you take, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like the sort of disinterested and fake interest in subjects as a result of being your job is just something completely alien to me. And I know that's an unusual, an unusual thing to be able to say for most people in the workforce, but it's definitely something that people should strive to, because job satisfaction equals higher productivity and just better work-life balance and everything that goes with it.
For sure. Speaking of work-life balance and higher productivity, one thing that's on my mind all the time, because I'm speaking to people about changing jobs and having better work-life balance and so on, and remote work has kicked off in COVID like we never thought, obviously.
Yeah.
As a CEO or, chief product officer. Now, how do you think about the remote work idea or the hybrid model that a lot of people are interested in? Some people never want to go back to the office, or they just want to go 2 or 3 days a week. What are your thoughts?
I think while we record this from Lisbon and the HQ of the company is in Dublin, it would be clear to say that remote working is working for me.
You're loving it.
But in saying that, we're also in my office, which I come to 3 or 4 days a week, because my need and focus for working and learning is in an environment that is low stress, low noise, and in an environment where my mindset goes to work. I can't work at home. So through the pandemic, I went to the office to work. There was no one there, but it was perfect environment for me. I think the answer to, remote working and the future of it is like, it depends on the person and depends on the company. Like in Lisbon, there's lots of people who are working for fully remote businesses, particularly in tech, where people are living where they want to live and they're being productive where they want. I think food businesses and particularly Strong Roots needed tangible access to people and remote access to people. And actually it's worked for us, because if we needed all 55 people to be in the same place, we would need a building that we couldn't afford, which would make a lot of the, P&L very stressful. Whereas we've been able to hire talent in different places with different expertise for more value in order to grow our business. We have people living in Brazil sometimes in the year, Belgium, France. I live in Lisbon. You have someone who previously was living in Australia and so on. And that worked for particular specializations. I think with remote work, people who lose out are junior employees, people who are there to learn, and all the tangible access to senior leaders and, people actually being there in a mentorship capacity, that's all lost. And I think that's unfortunate. And no matter how many people tell me that like a virtual coffee is the same thing, it never is, because when you're not with people, you can't see the nuances and behavioral, moments and, body language and, instant reaction to what you're saying versus what you're receiving. And that's how people learn. People learn multi-sensory, and going to virtual cuts down on a lot of those sensorial, cognitive learning opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it depends on who you are. Like, it took me 10 years to be able to work remote in my own office and know that was the way that I learn. And I'm still on the plane, a couple of times a week to see people and to make sure that we have that in person.
But like your internship would not have, in the family business, your internship would not have worked. Like no. Unless you're like, because that was one of the first things, you were remote on the phone. Then you had to go out to the factory floor. You had to go outside the office to the hallway to actually get to know people, to maybe have them say things they wouldn't say in a more formal environment. They're great points.
I think like a good example of the failure of remote working for most people is to look at early advice that I would get from my dad in particular would be, you're not going to sell it from behind the desk. And this was about going into your environment, experiencing it, talking to the people, understanding your work and doing it. And you're not going to learn from behind your desk either. And I think for people who think this is great, I can live in Bali or I can live in Tulum and I can do everything that I want to do, you're not going to learn. You're not going to grow. And there might be this kind of material obsession with being able to live anywhere and work anywhere at the moment because of costs and lifestyle and stuff. But ultimately, I think it does depend on your ambition. Like, if you want to be a food entrepreneur of a global household brand, you can't work remotely. It's just not possible. Or your remote needs to be in all the markets that you're in. If you want to do, very specific freelance tech jobs where it's about, programming and you've got enough life experience to be able to pass that on to a team in that environment, maybe it is, but I couldn't comment on that because that's not what I do. But food business, actually, a recent startup food entrepreneur asked me this same question recently. She's from the UK. She wanted to live in a Central European country. They're in their like year 2 of the business. And she was like, I think I can do this and go that. And I was like, you can definitely do it, but you'll be traveling more than you exist in that remote location. So like, if you're comfortable to sort of like set up your family in Spain and then also have to be in London for 4 days of the week, that's fine, but that's not remote working.
Yeah. That's a long commute.
Yeah. And like, I was doing it from, Ireland to the UK for years. It's not easy. I would sort of, you'll get out of it what you put in is another one of those turns of phrase. And I think depending on the business, I'd really kind of try and test what you're trying to do first, but also be willing to sort of backtrack as well.
Yeah, I think it makes tons of sense. I think it sounds very sexy to be able to do remote work or hybrid work, but I'm not sure how much it works. Like, I think your point was perfect about all the professions doesn't necessarily make sense. And also the time of your career. I think definitely younger people, let's say they're between 20 and 30, maybe they could be single and now they're working from their kitchen. That's super tough.
It blows my mind to hear about people in their first job who go to New York City and want to work from their apartment. It's just counterintuitive to me.
Why are you in New York?
Why would you go to the metropolitan city where it's all about experiences out in the environment and then want to stay in your tiny apartment that you're paying wild money for to have experiences over, virtual scenario. It doesn't make sense.
But one of the things that, like, on that kind of being able to leverage other, I suppose, opportunities, like one of the things that's really worked well for you, right, is the being able to have your office in Dublin while outsourcing what you needed somewhere else. But do you find like outsourcing the factory and all the production and stuff like that, do you find a lot of food entrepreneurs get stuck by trying to have an end-to-end like logistics or supply chain?
It's a good question. So our decentralized services model is definitely the way the food industry is going. So big manufacturers and big supply chain providers are consolidating lots of small businesses to be able to service multiple different products and categories and stuff. That is one way to do it. But, you know, people often ask, would you do it again if you were going to start something fresh? And actually, I think the vertical integration model of having like agriculture and packaging and everything controlled so that you did something unique that someone else couldn't do, there's also a value to it. It really is like, what business are you in? I think like outsourcing model is interesting to get like high quality, high output uniqueness. Sometimes you have to control more of the supply chain. I think that's another like series of a podcast that we could
fair enough. But, just follow my interest on some of those questions.
It depends on what you're doing. You know, that's sort of why I do mentorship, and that's why I'm really interested in doing mentorship, because when you field other people's problems to give them solutions, you're also figuring out what part of the industry could be done better.
Yeah.
Which makes it super interesting.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Also, when you start off with a new product and you solve the problem that way, you also wonder about competitors. I remember being in the shops a few times and thinking, I never saw those other sweet potatoes there that often.
Yeah.
And then that seemed to, I don't know, is that...
One good example I could give you is another entrepreneur who runs an incredibly successful tech company. I wonder if you'd mind me saying the name. Anyway, there's this guy in Italy who runs the most successful tech company in Italy, I think. And he asked me to come on a mentorship session one day to answer a few questions. And I was like, Jesus, what does this guy need to know? You know, he's like a super genius fella. Anyway, he was like, we're thinking of starting up a D2C meals food delivery business. And we've already started this little sort of beta testing program, and this is how it's going, etc. And I was like, where do you want to do it? And he was like, America. And I was like, I just wouldn't do it. And he goes, why? And I gave him all the reasons why. And he goes, but what if we did what Elon did and created a gigafactory food processing plant? And I was like, this is a different story now. And he was trying to figure out whether that model of like shock and awe, change the market, change the car market kind of thing would work for food. And then you could influence the position of the other big CPG companies on the market. And I was like, I don't know how you would do that. I would know how to ask the questions, and I want to be in if you do it.
Yeah.
He hasn't called me back yet, and I don't think he started it. But there is like the scope of how you would think about things differently changes the game.
Like this is that the end-to-end idea, like Apple controlling every part of their ecosystem or Tesla controlling every part of their ecosystem?
The question was, if we do that, would it work for food? And I don't know the answer to the question, and I don't know whether it would lead to negative outcomes later on when a share price was influencing the success of the business.
I don't know why it would be any different.
I could think of a few reasons.
So would you like to share?
Like, if you look at how pharmaceutical companies control a lot of the pesticides and seed, if you create a closed loop system on food, then one company or entity or person controlling food, I think would be a scary outcome. Maybe we already have that, and that goes maybe a little bit too deep for this question. But I think it's like morally and ethically, should someone control food supply? Maybe not.
Yeah, okay. You want a few people in between to make sure everything's going well.
I don't know. Probably.
Okay, ...
Or the people should be in the middle, maybe.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Gonna have to think about that one a little bit more.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, you know, when you just to loop back to the deal that you've done, that seems like a big deal. It seems like it seems like a mystery to me. How do you sit down and think, I put like 9-10 solid years work into this. everything I've worked for, 80 to 100 hours a week. And now I want to make sure that I do this as right as possible. You've organized the employees, you've organized all the nuts and bolts, but still you want to make sure that you're going to be rewarded for your efforts. Now, obviously, I'm not asking you to share any specific details, but I'd just love to know how you think about making sure that you get what your reward is. Because I think one of the things we all struggle with where we're pricing our services or whether we're asking for a salary increase, I think we negotiate with ourselves first. And I heard a great tip once on a podcast. It's actually Dave McWilliams' podcast. And he said, you should never negotiate with yourself.
Yeah, it's a really good question that I think I'm still in the process of trying to answer. Because as an entrepreneur, you run for so long trying to figure out what success looks like. And then, you know, in my case, you get success. You're trying to figure out like what you do with it. And, you know, success is multiple things. Like fiscal is one. But for me, it's been, you know, when you start a company and you have a goal as lofty as I did, and you achieve some element of that goal, which for me has been, you know, at least 80% of 20% I'm now helping trying to deliver, but definitely got the majority. Then it's about, like, entrepreneurship is an incredibly selfish journey, and you realize through that selfishness of all of the people that you supported you along the way. And I feel like it's then about taking time and stock about how you can be good to yourself and be good to the people who supported you after the fact. So for me, there's like a big element of altruism and pay it forward to the experiences that you've had. So whether that's, you know, assisting with the Irish business community or the food industry or friends and family in their own endeavors, or just being sort of available for people more, whether that's my children or my wife or my friends and family as an active member of their lives. It's kind of like success looks like putting yourself and your community in a successful position so then you can contribute it in a positive way with nothing to do with business. And I think that's where success will look like in the foreseeable future. It's certainly not, you know, an egomaniacal strive to be a billionaire. That doesn't make sense to me, but it does for a lot of other people because it's like, you know, the top of Everest or whatever. But for me, it's like take stock and use what you've learned or gained to help other people grow if they want. That is like where I'm at.
That's beautiful, man. That's beautiful.
Yeah, well, we'll see how it goes.
You're a poet. You're a poet. Didn't even know it.
We'll see how it goes.
But when I was thinking about our conversation and everything you've achieved, you know, reflecting over the years, I think you've always been a super generous person and full of abundance. And I don't mean in any sort of financial sense, although that too. I think I still owe you a couple of beers. But like whether it's organizing a reunion for our school friends, you organized a couple of those, and that was like loads of effort, or whether it be organizing big parties or getting friends together, or even helping out someone who's starting a business or trying to grow their business, or the mentorship. And so I was just wondering, like, how much is that, like, that abundance or that generosity a part of like your mindset? Because then it gets you to think like, I'm not scared of the next step, or there's not a risk there that I'm not willing for because I've got so much to offer. And I just think it's an interesting mindset. I don't know, have you ever reflected on that sort of mindset of abundance and generosity, or do you feel you have that, or where did you get it from?
Yeah. You know, also knowing me as long as you do, that I hate hearing compliments, and I'm terrible at receiving them.
Does it kind of put you up a little bit inside?
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying those very nice things. But I think I have reflected on it, and I think it comes from a place of privilege. Like, I think a lot of people feel like their privilege means that they should go and accumulate more. And my privilege has always been about contributing back. So like, you know, very much enjoying the spoils of our own gain, but also making sure that other people can enjoy them with you. Because as my COO, Fergal, would say, like, wealth is best shared. So for me, privilege is best shared as well. And it doesn't need to be in the form of money. You know, your time is way more valuable than money to people, whether it's like having a beer or having a shoulder to cry on or whatever it might be. I think that's that's why. I think it's if we delved deeper in a Freudian fashion, it would probably be some sort of shame associated with the success, which is not uniquely Irish. But
I was going to say, it feels a bit Irish, right?
There's a taste of Irishness
Yeah,
for sure.
isn't it?
And it's just kind of like community, easier to enjoy things with lots of people around you, for sure.
Sounds fantastic. So as Irish people, I guess sometimes we feel, and whether it's true or not is another thing, but we feel we undersell ourselves, or we feel awkward about selling ourselves, about presenting ourselves as confident, because we feel maybe it's, I don't know, it just comes across poorly. But you've had to sell yourself, you've had to sell your company, you've had to pitch to investors and so on. So if someone's watching this and you're going to give them a tip for how to not underplay themselves, not downplay themselves, not reduce their value or their worth, what would you say to say, look, ask for what you're worth and sell yourself well?
The Irishness thing is interesting. I've thought a lot about like why we diminish our goals and ambitions to other Irish people in particular. And I think it's from a time where there was an attempt to put a class system into Ireland. And I think Irish people have always pushed back against the class system because it represented an oppressor. And I think Ireland is now, over 100 years as an independent state. And I think it's actually time for Irish people to like smell themselves a bit. We're never going to be willing to have arrogance as part of a personality, which I think is quite important to Ireland. And like the beauty of Ireland is also in its humility of the people and stuff as well. But I think when it comes to business and when it comes to personal goals and outcome, there's no reason, to think that we can't be confident, and we can't be outwardly confident as well. Difference between confidence and arrogance. Actually, Endeavour, the organization I'm a part of, which supports entrepreneurs, has this really great guideline. I've done a couple of their international judging panels, and sometimes in various different parts of the world, you find very, very confident entrepreneurs. And they always ask this question at the judging stage where they're like, can we endeavorize them or not? Which means, are they a total dick, or can we bring them down to earth in a way that's going to be, good for people and good for community of fellow entrepreneurs? And I think Irish people could take a sort of a leaf out of that book where it's like, be kind, be confident, and know your own ability, and know the room you're in as well. Like, I think there's two ends of this scale where like you can be kind of quiet and reserved and understand the players you're playing with in a very poker sense, or you can go into a room and say you're the best thing in the world and actually you're still a rookie. So I think like emotional intelligence in that situation is very important. You can be confident, but know the room that you're in, or else, or in a similar fashion, like rise to the occasion as well. There's certain moments in your life where it's time to, get on the soapbox and tell everyone about it. Yeah. There's certain times where you should just shut the fuck up and listen. Yeah. And the listening is way better than the being outward. I don't know. It's in millions of pieces of content that I scroll through and whatever platform, but it's like, the quietest person in the room is the most intelligent person in the room. And I've always found that to be the case. Yeah, listening is a massive skill and often under-recognized, I think. Right? Social media, everyone is speaking at you the whole time. Yeah. I always think if people just sell themselves, not more than they are, not less than they are, but just exactly as they are. So I spend a lot of time trying to get people to just share the facts of what they've done and what they've achieved. But it's great to hear from your perspective, right? Selling yourself and your business over the last 9 or 10 years. Well, one of your best shares with me ever was victory stacking. I remember this well. Yeah. And like, I hate telling people the great things that you've done because you're not there yet. But you were always like, getting up and having a coffee in the morning could be one of your victory stacking things. If normally you lie in until 2:00 and don't do anything, or, having 3 conversations that you didn't intend to have with someone from your industry and learning something, like that's really helped me. Not with the smaller stuff, because I was always pretty good at the routine of that, but with the bigger stuff, as in like when you win a new account, have a fucking party about it with your people because they all contributed and everyone wants to know that they're making progress. And like I've gone from just get on with it. Yeah, we did it, but just get on with it to the next thing, to actually being really specific about like, let's fucking celebrate this. Let's everyone feel good about it. And then we go on to the next thing. I think in any small way, that's worth it. Now, don't have a coffee and then have a party. You're never going to get anywhere.
Still got to do some work in between, right?
But yeah. No, victory stacking has been really helpful.
So that's super. Like, but I love the way you emphasize that that celebration as part of the journey, because so often we just, especially if you're working with a team of high achievers or high performers, is just going from goal to goal to goal, and always in the whirlwind of dealing with problems, and never really taking a moment to pat themselves on the back. Do you pat yourself on the back?
People need an attaboy or attagirl or attaday. People need the kudos for sure.
So this has been fantastic. I feel like I've got all my questions answered. Those big, lofty, mysterious things that I've been wondering. Every time I see something about you pop up, like Sam got funding for this, or Sam's expanded into this region, and it's always been like this mystery. So this is really rewarding and enjoyable for me to kind of just pick through your brain piece by piece.
I'm glad after 26 years we can have this chat and complete the circle of like you life coaching me into the start of this, to
and now you business coaching me,
having the chat of it.
You business coaching me about how to expand and scale, because that's actually the part I'm at now.
That's cool.
Can I ask you, just as we finish up, maybe one more question? I would love to know your biggest learning over the last 9 or 10 years. Maybe something that you thought was one way when you kicked off, but then as you went through the various stages of business development, you thought, actually, I didn't think it worked that way. Or maybe something you learned about developing your team or about expanding.
There's so many of those. I'm not picking the sort of biggest one or the top one or whatever. I'm just sort of picking one as it comes to me. But I think underestimating the people that you have on the journey, particularly in the early stage, will be at your detriment. And I think you need to understand that, people are on their journey as well. So if you're a founder, if you're a co-founder, the sort of understanding of everyone's situation, from their family dynamics to what they're going through, is ultimately how you will be a better leader of people and a business. And some people sort of, and I've observed this in really big companies, where actually no one knows anything about anyone's personal lives, and the relationship starts from when they come in the door and, maybe how they take their coffee until when they go home in the evening. And what people don't realize is that like their day is peppered with communications from, a husband or a wife or, a son or daughter or whatever. And actually the majority of what people are dealing with in those nuanced circumstances about how pressured the job is actually stuff from a completely different environment. And understanding and investing in understanding those people's situations has been the most successful relationships and work that I've had. And sometimes it doesn't work out because of those things. But if you're not invested in the entire scope of someone's whole livelihood, you're never going to understand how to lead them properly. And some people don't want to turn up at that level. People actually like to keep the separation. But understanding it is important. That will mean that when people need a break, they get a break. But when people need a push, and you can push them as well. And sometimes it also makes the decision of that this isn't going to work. But when you know that it is going to work and you can support them through those things and elevate them, I've found that the loyalty and the productivity and the mutual respect that everyone has for each other is like gargantuan. And I think in a relatively short space of time, proud to say that like a majority of people have been there for a long time. Like we're only a 8 years trading business that wasn't just like me on my own. And, we have people that are there for 7, 6, 5 years, and it's on the basis of that. And sometimes I wasn't able to do that. And, people sort of churn through in 6 months or 12 months or whatever it is. And I think the longer you have people there, the better the culture is. The faster you want to grow, the quicker people churn out. So sometimes, the choices that you make in people will define either your growth or substance. And I would always go for substance as a long-term venture. There's a lot of like choices that you have to make around sustainability long-term of your business. So like there's this culture in tech where you build fast and you sell fast, and it's a 0 to 5 year strategy, and then someone else takes something else further. The businesses of substance that are still around after like 100 years, 150 years, always had the things that I'm talking about, the sort of value for people and their livelihoods and stuff. And I think I would love to see a shift between this growth capitalist mindset and a bit more substance that allowed sort of businesses to last for more generations. And I think I got that from a family business that's been around for whatever, 50 years
Thinking
now.
in decades, right? Not just...
Yeah. And I think there's this like materialistic sort of consumer driven mindset that has made the norm be the Silicon Valley exit in 5 years, when actually we should be looking longer term. More value, more work-life balance, equity in people. People can actually have a life and have a work life. And, you know, I think, you know, my leaning and bias towards a B Corp style is much more helpful in that. So I think that's my tip. It's the investment in people is what you'll get out.
Fantastic. And you've proven it works, right? You've proven it works by
hopefully, yeah.
By getting to where it is. It's also really wonderful to hear that your focus on relationship building and people and culture has been there from the start, and you've always emphasized that, and it's led to this success. And I hope it actually goes into the minds of people listening to this to go, okay, this can be done. We should focus on culture, because a lot of times it feels like the poor relation, right? So that's super great to hear. So good on you. So finally, thanks so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom, and congratulations on your phenomenal success today.
Being on the Ronan Kennedy podcast.
There we go. Thanks for the plug. And I think we should always have chats with lights and microphones and cameras, because it's the most normal way to talk to one of your buddies.
This has been fun. Let's do it again.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, bro. Cheers. Talk to you soon.